Welcome along, guys. Well, it's another fantastic English summer's day. So today I've got my hands on the all-new 701 Enduro LR. Now the LR stands for long range, and there's a reason why it's called LR. It's because it's got these great big extra fuel tanks at the front. This bike has 12 litres up front, 13 litres at the rear. So we're going to take this out today. I've had this for about a week. I've been using it, I've been riding it normally, I've been using it as a road bike. Today I'm going to go do a bit of off-road on it as well. So we're going to test its off-road credentials. So this should be quite an interesting video. Roll the intro, chops. So today I'm going to be meeting up with Pete, Mr. Fish, Pezza, the usual suspects basically, but rather than just go locally to me on the lanes, the beauty of this bike is you can travel to go on the lanes. So I'm actually meeting them about 50 miles away from my house, up in the Surrey Hills area. They're going to introduce me to some of the lanes up there, and 30 chops. And I'm interested to see what this bike is like off-road. It's been a while. I'm not an off-road expert by any stretch of the imagination. It's been 6 months since I've even been off-road, so I'm going to be rusty. But, you know, if you're really serious about your enduro, you're probably not looking at one of these anyway. This is a bike so you can have some fun on, basically. You can go on the lanes, have that fun, without all the seriousness and maintenance and cost which is involved with a real enduro. Not saying this isn't a real enduro, I'm saying this is just a compromise between road and off-road. So where does the 701 fit in the marketplace? Well, this is obviously a bigger, heavier bike than the full enduro range which Husky offer. Those full enduros are only around 100 kilos, they're very light, high maintenance. There's a lot of maintenance involved with them. You know, I'm running out of petrol on my front tank. There's a little switch on the dashboard. You go to rear, and that's now switched onto the rear tank. I'll just show you, as that just happened on camera, that's fantastic. So I can show you how it works. So you don't get any light or fuel light on the dash for the front tanks, but you still get the fuel light on the rear, on the normal rear tank. So you're best off using the fuel from the front tank first, and then you know you've got the light to rescue you on the rear tank. So I have done, let me check my mileage, I've done 120 miles on the front tanks. Now, as I say, the front tanks hold 12 litres of petrol. Now those 120 miles I've not really been taking it easy. I've been out riding with the Supermoto guys, so she's had a little bit of stick. That's not 120 miles of poodling along by any stretch of the imagination. So that's 120 miles on the front. Let's see how many miles we get on the rear, because Husqvarna actually quote a 500 kilometre range on this bike. I'm not going to get that, not with the way I've been riding it, but let's see what you can get in real world conditions. So where was I before I was rudely interrupted by running out of petrol on the front tanks? So the Husky range, basically, you have your full enduros, your lightweight 100 kilo motorcycles, brilliant off-road, but very limiting if you want to do any sort of distance on them. Also, the full enduros need a lot of maintenance. Oil changes every 15 hours on the 4-strokes, new piston and rings every 100-150 hours on the 2-strokes. So, and of course you've got a limited range. You can only travel fairly local. You can't sit on the motorway on those bikes. You know, they're not designed for that. So this is really where the 701 Enduro comes in. This is a bike with some off-road capability. It's got the same suspension as the full Enduro models, with a full, I think this one's got 200 millimeters of travel front and rear. So very close to the full Enduro range. And more importantly, this bike has 6,000 mile service intervals. Plenty of grunt for overtaking. 74 brake horsepower, 71 newton meters of torque. So she's perfectly capable on the road. Not at any point do you feel like you're you're being compromised because of this bike's off-road ability. The only real difference, I've got the 690 SMCR, of course, which is quite a similar bike to this. The biggest differences I've noticed when I've stepped on this is, of course, this has got a 21-inch front wheel. So this has got your full off-road front wheel. It's also got some 50/50 tyres on. They're knobbly, but they've got a rounded profile to give you a bit of road holding. Because, I mean, really, this bike is a compromise. It has to do two things. It has to be a good road bike and a good off-road bike. You're getting wet. Bloody rain. You can cruise at 70 on this on the motorway, no problem at all day long. I rode this back from Silverstone to my house, which is about 120 miles on the motorway. No problem at all. That's the beauty of this bike. It's a great all-rounder. I filled this bike up front and rear, so I filled it up to the full 25 litres, and you can feel that weight a little bit on the road. In the cornering you can feel that weight, but you're bound to, you know, you've got an extra 12 litres sat over the front wheel, so you can notice that, but it's not too intrusive. You just have to be a little bit more careful, you know, laying it down in the corners, because don't get me wrong, despite this bike having a 20-inch front wheel and the higher travel suspension, it still really handles well. Compared to my 690 SMCR, it's not quite as sharp. You have to give it a little bit more counter steering to get it into the corners, but in all honesty, I'd say it's 90, maybe even more than that. It's probably 90% as fun in the twisties as what the SMCR is. It's really quite surprising. When I first got on it, I was like, oh god, this feels horrible. But it's just because you don't get the feedback from the front tyre like you do on the Supermoto. The front tyre, you've got that feedback from the front wheel. You don't really get this on this because of the bigger wheel, because it's got the knobblies. You don't really get much feedback. You've got to just trust it a little bit more. But once you do that, once you do trust it, it's actually great fun on the road. Right, we've got to take a right in a minute. The rain has started again, thank you for that. New for this year, the 701 comes with a quick shifter and a blipper. Works very, very well. I've got motocross boots on today because I'm going off-road, and it doesn't work quite as well when you've got motocross boots on. The blipper does, but the quick shifter's not quite as good with the big clunky boots. You've got to give it quite a firm shift, and I haven't probably adjusted my gear lever quite correctly for the off-road boots, so I'm struggling a little bit on the upshifts with the quick shifter with these boots on. But normally, normal road boots, it's absolutely perfect. What they've done on these is they've actually put two sensors, so you've not just got a single sensor to detect when the lever's moving, you've got that sensor, plus you've got another sensor to confirm when the actual gear is engaged. So this is how they've managed to get such a slick system on a big thumper, by having two sensors. And then of course those sensors then monitor, or the ECU then monitors what the revs the bike's doing, what speed the bike's doing, what those two sensors are doing, to adjust the kill time and how long it's going to cut the fuel for and the ignition for as you change gears. So it's a very sophisticated system, these new quick shifter systems, and they work very, very well. Looks like we're going for it. No, we're not. Come on, Jesus. Polo ponies, what, they actually pulling it? Oh, it's got a lot of grunt, this. Very powerful bike. It's quick. No slower than the Supermoto versions, really. And you do have that extra versatility, which I absolutely love. On the wet roads, yeah, these knobbly tyres in the wet, you've got to be a little bit careful. You will not get as much grip as what you will on the Supermoto equivalent. You can't hammer it around, unfortunately, not when it's wet like this. And it hasn't rained for ages as well, so these roads are going to be pretty greasy. But that's not all bad news, because it has the electronics suite as well. The 701 now has electronics, which on a bike with knobbly tyres, cornering ABS, cornering traction control, is actually quite a nice little feature. See, she slipped over that manhole cover there. We'll test it in a minute. There's two modes. There's mode 1, which is what I've got engaged at the moment. Now that's more for the road. That'll give you extra protection in the corners for the cornering ABS. It'll give you more traction when you're cornering. It'll keep the front wheel down a little bit more. So it's a road function basically. Then you have mode number 2. The throttle response is also softened a little bit probably. Oh, it's absolutely hammering down. I may turn off until it stops raining. This is ridiculous. So we had to do our cameras, didn't we? It's the trouble you're coming out with faffers. You've got two modes on this. You've got an on-road and an off-road. Number 1 is the road mode, but I'm going to do it in number 1 first because I think it softens off the throttle response a little bit, and it also gives more traction and more ABS. So it's a good way of seeing how good that traction control is by taking it on somewhere rough like this, off-road, and see what the intervention's like. So I'm going to try mode 1 and then we'll switch to mode 2. There's also a separate button to turn off the traction control, but we'll leave it on for now just to see what she's like. It is a pretty sophisticated system. 6-axis IMU, you know, all of that high-tech stuff on this. It's not a basic system, so I'm really interested to see how it handles the dirt. Yeah, that's full throttle. Traction control is doing its stuff. Hey, yeah, interesting. They ain't hanging about. They're straight out, aren't they? Straight out the gates. They've done a few lanes already, so they're... Yeah, that traction control is holding it back. It's very clever. Like I say, this is the road mode for the traction control, not really the off-road mode. The off-road mode will let you spin up a bit more. It will let the wheel come up and let you do a few wheelies, all with the safety protection and the hand holding of that system. Lovely for a beginner like me. That was brief. I have to say that traction control is impressive. Impressive how good it is. You know, it's not just like, you know, it's very, very smooth. It's sort of letting it, feels like it was getting loose. It was letting it get a little bit loose at the back, but keeping it under control, even had the throttle wide open. So very clever. Lanes like that is perfect for this bike. Absolutely what it's made for. You don't want anything too technical. I think that's when the weight, that's when you're going to feel the weight, but that sort of lane, bloody brilliant. In that road mode, it doesn't really let you have any fun with regards wheelies and stuff. I have tested it. It will wheelie beautifully on a full load of fuel over the front. I mean, these are the answers to the questions you're asking. It will wheelie with a full load of fuel. And when you're in off-road mode, the reason they let you have some wheelie action is, of course, for getting over logs, stuff like that, without being restricted. And it will let you get to a reasonable height, in all honesty. So we'll try it for the next lane in the off-road mode, the official off-road mode. It should let it spin up a bit more, have a bit more fun, but still be there in the background, keeping its little beady eyes on you. You can, of course, turn it off if you don't want it. There's a button there just to turn the traction off. Then you're completely free of all the electronic restraints to do whatever you want. But I think the thing with these electronic systems, it's about having a very advanced system with the IMU, which actually complements your riding, not hinders it. And on these latest bikes like this, it certainly complements it. The brakes on it are downscaled from the Supermoto. It's got a 300mm front disc, so still a pretty beefy front disc, but only a 2-pot caliper, not a 4-pot caliper like on the Supermoto version, because you don't want too much brakes off-road, but you still need some decent brakes because you're on the road, so it's finding that compromise, but it's nowhere near as sharp as its Supermoto brother. Unsuitable for motor vehicles, that's always a good sign. This one looks quite tight, it's going to be a bit more gnarly. What's that gearing going to be like when it's a bit tighter? Bloody hell, that's low. Yeah, low hanging bloody trees here, that's for sure. Stalled it. Stalled it again. What gear am I in? Yeah, the gearing, that's the trouble, the gearing is quite quite tall on it. Bit of movement down here. This is what I did find when you're going slower speeds, it's getting the right gear. And I do find on this model too, for me, the throttle is actually quite sharp. It's nicely calmed down on the one position. But yeah, low hanging trees here. We're getting a bit rougher now. Let's stand up a little bit. This is first gear. So I could probably do with second really, and chug it out a little bit. Woo! Oh Christ, this is getting low now. I'm going to go to position 1, you know. I think it just, for this gnarly stuff, it just softens the throttle off a little bit more for a beginner like me. I think my bloody mirrors will go underneath. Bloody mirrors! Got a face full of bush now. And not the sort I like. Logs, bushes. Yes, this is quite gnarly down here. Woo. I haven't let any air out of the tyres. No, because we're in between road and off-road. So that's if they go into second and it's almost a little bit too chuggy. That's why I've stalled it a couple of times. So you really want first, but then you're right in the power a little bit. I need to stand up really, but it's so... branches are so low. Yes, the second's too much. Ooh. It's amazing, that traction control in the road mode, which I'm in because I'm a wimp. I might drop a little bit of air out the front tyre. It's bouncing around quite a lot. But then with the bike, which is a bit heavier, you've got to be careful you don't bang something hard and then get the tube to pinch, which is what I had on the 890 adventure I bought. So you do have to sort of play that balancing act a little bit. It's definitely harder on this compared to the dedicated Enduros. It's definitely more difficult. The extra weight does make it a little bit more difficult, and you know, the compromise with the tyres. I think the tyres is probably the biggest thing. I think if you were going to use this during the winter, you'd probably put on a more off-road focused tyre. Whoa, front end. Easy, chopsy. Oh, drop. Whoosh. Oh, last thing I want to do is come off this, to be honest. Close. A little bit slippery for my liking. Look at that for a view, and look at this for a view. I thought I'd just stop by the river, by the pond, and do a quick little walk around of the bike, point out some features. Excuse my squeaky shoes. So basically it's all standard 701 Enduro stuff. The DID wheels, the 21-inch front tyre with the Continental 50-50 rubber. So that's what I'm saying about 50-50 rubber. You see, it's got a bit of a curve to it, but it's still knobbly. So I'd say that's 50-50. Maybe biased a little bit more toward... yeah, I'd say it's 50-50. The main features of this bike is, of course, those big tanks. Those big danglies it's got, with those 13 litres, 12 litres of fuel in. But, you know, from the front of the bike, it does give it a little bit of an odd look from the front. From the side, it does look better. The seat's nice, you know, all the graphics are nice on this year's model. The rear tyre's an 18-inch rear, I believe. Again, 50-50 rubber, of course. It's all a little bit dirty after my off-roading, so please excuse the mud. The rear filler, as I say, 13 litres at the back, and then up front you've got same key, they're both lockable, same key works both of them obviously. You've got the 12 litres at the front end. The Enduro comes with a splash plate as standard, the Supermoto doesn't have the splash plate. WP Explorer suspension, fully adjustable, preload, rebound, compression dampening, everything. Well, actually, apart from preload, it doesn't have preload. Rebound and compression dampening, no preload. The rear shock, if I can get to it, is adjustable for preload, compression dampening, rebound dampening. It's just the front one. The Enduro has these metal pegs, not the rubberized pegs to grip your boots when you're off-road. The way the front tank setup works is you've got a bit of hose connecting the two, which is this lower one here. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, it's quite enclosed. And then you've obviously got the feed going off to the throttle bodies, the fuel feed, and obviously you can disconnect it here. An interesting thing is you can retrofit these onto the Supermoto. So if you wanted to go on a huge, massive trip on your Supermoto, these tanks will fit on the Husky Supermoto. Of course, you're going to need to buy all the fuel lines, the switches, you know, it wouldn't be a cheap conversion, I wouldn't imagine, but you can do it. But there we go. Let's jump back on. The tanks are quite big down by your legs. You've got to put your feet out. They are in the way a little bit if you like go, you know, Enduro, going around tight corners and stuff. They are right there, but you get used to it. You sort of work around it. Comparing it to the Supermoto version, even on the road, it's I'd say 90% as much fun on the road. It's not until you get really tight and twisty. It's the feedback you're missing. You don't get the same levels of feedback as the Supermoto from the tyres, from the wheel, well, the tyres and the wheels, because it's got the 21. But it's still 90% as much fun. And then you've got this. You can ride to lanes. You can go with this LR version with these tanks. You could cross continents. It's an incredibly versatile bike. Imagine on some sort of adventure across Europe or around the world trip on something like this, as opposed to like a normal big heavy adventure bike. You get some real rough terrain. I'd much rather be on this than a GS. When things get really tight, muddy, and you're having to lift the bike up and you're dropping it. That's the beauty of this. I think it is incredibly versatile. Well, the fuel light has just come on at 261 miles. Oh, I'm on the wrong tank as well. That's on the front tank. 261 miles the fuel light is on. I'm pretty impressed with that, and there's another 20 miles in reserve, maybe 30 miles in reserve. So full load, it isn't far off the 300 miles which KTM claim, which would be the best possible mileage you could get, and I've achieved 261 to the fuel light with normal, well, quite hard riding if anything, certainly not being gentle with it. So pretty impressive. 261 miles. That would be a hell of an adventure between petrol stations. This is power level 1, which is full power. It's down, boy. What's he done here? I told you I was scared back there. Whoa! I've never dropped a bike before in my life. Whoa! That's it. That's it. Listen to this.